So I want to warn you in advance that the sermon I'm about to give will explicitly address violence. I won't be gross, but I want you to have the choice about how much you're going to listen to. The sermon is not going to be easy for a number of reasons, not just honesty about violence, but also honesty about naming racism and white privilege. As always, when speaking about systems and groups, I'll be talking about patterns, and knowing that there are exceptions to patterns does not make those patterns not real. As we venture into this territory together, may we remember that this conversation is not optional in communities of color because people's lives depend on it. In this integrated community, which right now is between 85 and 90% white and 10 to 15% people of color, may we not see it as optional either. May we know that all of our lives and our humanity depends on it. And also let me say that you are my people. I have been so impressed by this community and so proud to be your minister in these last several weeks. The way that you have responded to Ferguson and this national dialogue on racism and white privilege has been thoughtful and anti-racist. I invite you to further dialogue with me, with your families, your parents, and your children, and with each other. May we approach this dialogue with open minds and open hearts, trust one another's good intentions, and listen deeply. The work of anti-racism is not easy, and the road to the beloved community is long. I trust that you are committed to it for the long haul, even when it gets rough, as am I. And I hope that our time together furthers all of our commitment to justice. When I was a girl, my dad told me about being in college at the University of Madison when Martin Luther King Jr. was killed. He remembers the protests on campus and how surprising they were to a young man from small town Illinois. He remembers his roommate borrowing his mattress to take it to a sit-in. He remembers not going to the protests himself. Every time I've witnessed him tell that story, I hear a little shame in his voice. I was young, he says, sheepishly, and I didn't understand what was going on. What is going on? In the 2006 Alfonso Cuarón science fiction dystopia, Children of Men, the world has been afflicted with infertility. When the film opens in the year 2027, no woman has been pregnant in 2 decades, and the world has dissolved into chaos. People have lost all hope. They are violent and despairing. Everywhere the world over, people are at war, and the one remaining government in Britain is brutal, hierarchical, and militarized. Chains, fences, and paramilitary police with machine guns separate the haves from the have-nots, the British from the immigrants and the refugees. In the midst of this, the main character is introduced to a miraculously pregnant woman, a refugee, a black woman, a poor woman, and an immigrant named Key. She is the first woman to be pregnant in over 2 decades. And his immigrant rights activist ex-wife introduces her to him and asks him to help her find safety. During their journey together through violence and through threat after threat to all of their lives, Key gives birth. A variety of groups try to kidnap her and the child for profit or for their own uses. in the midst of an ambush where government forces and rebels are shooting at one another and the rattle of machine guns and bombs going off are all around, the newborn baby starts to cry. And everything stops. The baby wails, and the soldiers freeze. It goes silent, and everyone turns to look at the miracle. A newborn child, new life. What's going on? Over the summer, I was staying at a friend's house in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I came downstairs to a TV that no one had been watching. So I came downstairs to the news without any context of what was happening on the television, and I saw a large black man talking to white police officers in an urban setting. He was saying, "Every time you see me, you want to mess with me. I'm tired of it. It stops today. I'm minding my business, officer. I'm minding my business. Please, just leave me alone. I told you the last time, please just leave me alone. Please." Then one of the officers reaches toward the man who says, "Please don't touch me." At this point, two officers begin to grab his arms, and he puts his hands in the air and says, "Please do not touch me." Then one of the officers jumps on his back and puts him in a chokehold. While the officer is on his back with him in a chokehold, he pushes the man to the ground, and you can hear the men say, "I can't breathe. I 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 can't breathe." What's going on? Black people have long known that they are in danger of police violence. White violence, often exacted through the police, has been used to control black communities since slavery ended. This is not a new phenomenon. There is, however, new national attention being paid to it right now. In the last 6 months, there have been 6 high-profile national cases of unarmed black males ages 12 to 43 being killed by white police officers. Eric Garner in Staten Island was 43, and he was killed with a chokehold. The rest of the men, 18-year-old Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, 22-year-old John Crawford in Beaver Creek, Ohio, 12-year-old Tamir Rice in Cleveland, and 34-year-old Romaine Brisbane in Phoenix, Arizona, were all shot. John Crawford and Tamir Rice both had toy guns when they were shot and killed in Ohio, which is an open carry state. John Crawford, the 22-year-old, was in a Walmart, and the toy gun was something he had just picked up off the shelf. Tamir Rice, the 12-year-old, was in a park, playing. There's also Darian Hunt, who is a 22-year-old black male who was shot and killed by police in September in Utah because he had a sword, a toy sword, that he used for cosplay. Utah is also an open carry state. In all of the cases except for Eric Garner's, the police involved claimed they were afraid for their lives. With Garner, Officer Pantalejo, the man who put him in a chokehold, said he was trying to arrest Garner and possibly trying to stop him from biting an officer. In every other case, the black victim was shot, usually within seconds, because the white officer claimed to be afraid for his life. A USA Today analysis of the FBI statistics on police homicides estimates that a white police officer kills a black victim on average 96 times per year. In the narrative claiming that the police officers in these cases did the right thing, made the right decision, the argument is that they were genuinely afraid for their lives, and that it is better for them to have acted to defend themselves and stay alive than to have not acted and possibly been killed. I grant that it was possible that these officers, in a moment of panic, were genuinely afraid of a 12-year-old boy, a toy sword, and a young man who had picked something up off the shelf in a Walmart, all of which happened in open carry states where it is legal for people to visibly display weapons. But the thing is, white people don't get shot for openly carrying their weapons. Part of what we have to do as a country, part of what we have to do as a people is to admit that the threat assessment that's being made by these officers rests on a narrative that black people, and particularly black men, are dangerous criminals. That's the story underneath the fear. As a society and as individuals, we have to admit that this is the narrative that's giving these actions power. If we're going to address police violence and the use of deadly force against communities of color, we have to be honest about the root of why the officers are afraid and admit our own complicity in that narrative of fear. All the stories about how he should not have been holding that thing that looked like a weapon in public are part of this narrative of fear. Sometimes that thing that he was holding is a toy gun, sometimes it's a cosplay sword, sometimes it's a lighter, it's a bottle, sometimes the man just has his hands in his pockets. Underneath all of it is the assumption that the man is a dangerous criminal until he somehow proves to you that he is not. Until he somehow proves to the officer that he is not. Unitarian Universalist minister and the president of Starr King School for the Ministry, Reverend Rosemary Bray McNatt, writes about this assumption and how it affects her life in the essay Fears, published in the anthology Been in the Storm So Long. She writes, "Most married women fret about a tardy husband. Young black women like myself worry more. For most people in New York, the urban boogeyman is a young black man in sneakers. But we live in Central Harlem, where every young man is black and wears sneakers. So we learn to look into the eyes of young males and discern the difference between youthful bravado and the true dangers of the streets. No, I have other fears. I fear white men in police uniforms, white teenagers driving by, thin, panicky, middle-aged white men on the subway. Most of all, I fear that their path and my husband's will cross one night as he makes his way home. I fear that some white person will look at him and see only his or her nightmare, another black man in sneakers. But he's also a writer, an amateur cyclist, a lousy basketball player, his parents' son, my life's companion. When I peek out the window, the visions in my head are those of blind white panic at my husband's black presence. Once upon a time, I was vaguely ashamed of my paranoia about his safety in the world outside our home. After all, he's a grown man, but he's a grown black man on the streets alone. I am reminded over and over how dangerous white people can be, how their fears are still a hazard to our health. When white people are ruled by their fears of everything black, then every black man is a rapist, even a murderer. what's going on. In contrast, white people are not assumed to be dangerous criminals. They can fight for their right to bear arms by walking in groups, boldly brandishing weapons in public without a problem, even get press attention for it. White mothers do not sit down with their white sons to tell them never to play fight in public, to never run in public, to never carry anything that looks like a weapon in public, to move their hands slowly and explain every movement they make if and when they are pulled over. In fact, white people who actually commit crimes are often given more leniency than black people who have not committed a crime. White people are assumed innocent, and white lives are assumed worthy of saving, even when they have done something wrong. There's a new hashtag on Twitter called Criming While White, which documents instance after instance of how white people were coddled, helped, and released by the police when they were caught committing crimes. People who are posting with this hashtag are from all over the country. They don't know one another, and they're just remembering what happened to them that one time they stole a car or dealt drugs or got in an accident that was their fault. This is a very different experience from black people who have been arrested, beaten, choked, and shot when they have not committed a crime. When white people are caught doing something illegal, the narrative, the overarching narrative in the media is about helping them. It's about getting them into treatment or therapy. It's about mental illness. It's about healing. It's a narrative that's about their inherent worth and dignity, despite them having made mistakes. As Unitarian Universalists, this is certainly something that we support. But we have to contrast that when black people have made the same or even less mistakes, the narrative becomes one about thugs and what they should not have done if they didn't want that thing to happen to them, or how whatever did happen to them was their own fault, how they had it coming. We're not supposed to honor them or grieve them. We're no longer allowed to claim that their lives mattered and that they should not have been killed because they did something wrong. If a person is black, then they need to have been a perfect victim, a quote-unquote good kid, in order for people to say that their lives mattered. If a person is white, it is assumed that their lives mattered, even if they weren't perfect. It's not the same treatment. It's not proportional, and it is about race. That's why the meme that's coming out of this national dialogue is Black Lives Matter. No matter what they've done, perfect, imperfect, they matter. Because we're working to recognize the inherent worth and dignity of every human being, every single human being. So currently, the law is designed to support the use of deadly force by police officers if they reasonably believe that that use is necessary. This so-called objective reasonableness is the measure by which a court decides whether or not a police homicide is legal. What this has meant in real life is that American courts almost universally take the subjective assessment of the police officer at the moment of their decision to use deadly force as the measure of whether or not that decision itself was correct. If the officer's decision itself is the measure of objective reasonableness, how then would a court ever find an officer to be incorrect about the decision that they made? When the officer is white and the person the officer killed is black, the racist narrative of the dangerous black man is at play. To pretend that this powerful narrative does not exist gives it more power. To pretend that it wasn't involved in a snap judgment made by a white officer faced with a black man who has something, anything, in his hands, is to ignore how racism undergirds our country. We are not post-racial. We are still in it. We like to tell ourselves stories about how the 60s solved it all and civil rights happened and we're all good, but that's not true. We still have a long ways to go. This is our nation's original wound. And as people of conscience, we know that fear is not a reason to kill another human being. But that is exactly what the current system allows. The narrative of the scary, dangerous black man pulses like a snake in white consciousness. Because of the broader narratives in our society, this bigger context, this bigger picture in which we are all immersed, white people are trained to think of black men as criminals and as less than inherently worthy and dignified. Thousands of people are in the streets chanting, "I can't breathe," and the whole damn system is guilty. Because it is. Watching Eric Garner be killed on video might drop you to your knees. It should take your breath away and make you weep. But this grief, this rage, is not only about Eric Garner or Michael Brown or 12-year-old Tamir Rice. May their names stay on our lips. The problem that we're facing is bigger than that. It's systemic racism. This happens all the time, and it is codified in law and in practice. So what does that mean for us? For people of conscience? In their song, Ella's song, the all-female black a cappella group Sweet Honey in the Rock sings, "We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Until the killing of black men, black mothers' sons, is as important as the killing of white men, white mothers' sons." What's going on? Although systemic racism is not new, and the habit of police violence against communities of color is not new, what is new is the attention that these cases are getting, the narrative-changing meme that is so widespread now that Black Lives Matter, the national outcry all over social media, the mass media, and in the streets, and the momentum that all of this creates for systemic change. Technology and social media are spreading this message faster than it has been spread in the past, and indisputably, you can't watch that video and not see what happened. Even George W. Bush, I kid you not, said it was difficult to understand the Staten Island grand jury verdict that did not indict the officers who killed Garner. There's a public sea change, and the current momentum might be enough to make systemic change. My father did not understand what was going on when he was a young man and his roommate borrowed his mattress for the sit-in. when Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. May we not make the same mistake. May we recognize what is happening now and join in the momentum in whatever way we can as a congregation, as a family, and as individual people. As Unitarian Universalists, we have a deep spiritual practice of questioning. That practice is how many of us ended up in Unitarian Universalist churches in the first place. Our fourth principle recognizes the importance of a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We wonder about things, and we let our wonder lead us towards truth. May we use our spiritual practice now to question given narratives about the dangerous black man and to question how those narratives are deployed in society in order to uphold systemic injustice. May we use our practice of questioning to look inside in this winter quiet time and see how those narratives are influencing our own thinking and our own framework of understanding. And may we go further and use our commitment to a responsible search for truth and meaning to question how the entire system is at fault. May we wonder how to make it better. May we be curious and open to new ideas, new narratives, and new ways of knowing. May we not only ask questions of ourselves, but also of our neighbors. And may we learn to listen to our neighbors in a new way. May our sense of wonder and questioning allow us to be open to not having all the answers, because we don't. To not knowing the full picture. May we be open to learning from and following the lead of experts on the subject matter, the communities of color who face it every day. May our wonder lead us to truth. May it lead us to new relationship. May it lead us to a broader love and a more inclusive knowing. May we recognize in a new way that every single life is a miracle. Like Key's baby stopped the soldiers in the midst of madness, may that miracle of life, regardless of skin color, station, mistakes made in the past, stop us in our tracks in wonder. Black lives matter. All lives matter. May it be so, and amen.